Greetings, warriors. My name is Pruitii, and welcome to this episode of Let's Talk Mom, where we dive into learning about the wonders of life, mental health, and self-care. Hi, how's everybody doing? It feels like it's been a while since I've recorded an episode of this. I apologize. I have been pretty sick, and my voice is finally recovering. Finally, it's taken so incredibly long. Originally, this video was supposed to go out in December because it's all about loneliness, and unfortunately, December is a time that a lot of people tend to feel lonely because it's the holidays, and it's just a lot of feelings happen at the end of the year. So I want to talk about, why loneliness is a thing, why we feel loneliness, why we deal with it, and how to take steps to overcome it, because let's face it, there's a lot of people who feel a lot of loneliness, and I think we should talk about it. Yeah? So let's just go ahead and dive on in. So before we begin, we really need to define what the heck loneliness is. I can't talk. Loneliness is a subjective experience, meaning it's unique to you. I might feel lonely in certain situations, and you might not feel lonely at all. You might thrive in that kind of location. It makes it hard to identify because it's subjective. You could be lonely in a crowd, but somebody might not be. It really depends on you. You could have somebody where they, are in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of a desert, no neighbors for miles and miles and miles and miles, and maybe they're not lonely. And the opposite could be completely true. Maybe you know somebody who's a social butterfly, who has people around them all of the time, and yet they still feel lonely. It's a very unique emotion in that sense. Because, you could look at somebody and be like, well, why are you lonely? You have 80 friends that you can go and talk to, but, you're still lonely. As humans, we inherently are social beings. Whether you are an introvert or an extrovert, we are all social beings. We rely on other people that are around us. And as we evolved, we mirror the neurons that people have for emotions. So it's kind of like leaking emotions to other people. You've probably experienced it. You see somebody else that's happy and it kind of just radiates into your body. It's part of how we as humans connect with one another. And all of that stuff is important to know when it comes to loneliness, because when you feel lonely, you kind of can't really catch that. You can't really catch other people's emotions, because when you feel lonely, you tend to shut yourself off. You tend to close those doors, even though if you really crave that to happen. I want to also mention that it's kind of incorrect to say majority of humans prefer being solitary, especially in modern life. It's easy to say that I feel most comfortable when I am alone, and that's okay. You could be alone, but alone is different than lonely. So I want you guys to keep that in mind as we talk more about loneliness. It's humans in general feel most comfortable when we're connected, where we can share emotions and stories and be connected. And we're missing out on a lot of that connection. That's why people feel lonely. We've evolved to feel safe in numbers, and our brains have grown to recognize loneliness as a threat, because if you're not in numbers, you're not safe. The centers of our brain that monitor for danger, including the amygdala. Wow, I can't even say that word. I have it in my notes. It kind of goes into an overdrive, doing your fight or flight stress hormones, which both are very, very good and also very, very bad. It's a lot for your body to handle. Your heartbeat rises, your blood pressure goes up, blood sugar, everything just goes up, and your body is tense. And when you're lonely, you enter that state and you think the remedies for your loneliness, your friends, family, community, are threats. They are sources of rejection and apathy rather than comfort and care. Loneliness can trick our brains into thinking, wow, we're freaking out, nobody loves us, everybody hates us, let's just continue to curl up in a corner, when that's not actually true. According to a survey done by Cigna back in 2018, loneliness reached an all-time high, with nearly half of the study, which is about 20,000 people in the study, reported that they sometimes or always feel alone. Those were pre-pandemic numbers. The pandemic utterly shattered the foundations that we had before it, especially when it comes to loneliness. And I don't think a lot of people realize that. You might be like, yeah, I'm lonely, but what about Susie next door? Is she lonely? More likely than not, yeah. There was also a study done quite recently. My notes say last year, but I honestly, is it really last year? I can't remember anymore. They studied about 6,000 US adults, and they linked frequent loneliness to dissatisfaction with family, social life, and community life. About 28 people, wow, I can't talk today, guys, wow. About 28% of those dissatisfied with their family life feel lonely all or, well, most of the time. The satisfaction with one's social life follows a similar pattern to family life. 26% of those dissatisfied with their social lives are frequently lonely, compared to the 5% of people who are satisfied with their social lives. They don't really feel all that lonely. Like the 5%, like it's ginormous number differences that I'm talking about here. 1 in 5 Americans say that they are not satisfied with their quality of life in their local communities. They often feel loneliness. That's so many Americans that feel inherently lonely. It's painful to be lonely. It really is. It's not one of those emotions that you like feeling. And loneliness tends to set in on people who don't have emotional, mental, or financial resources to really get out of that and satisfy their needs socially. Or they could also be lacking a social circle that provides those benefits. And that can lead to chronic loneliness. And chronic loneliness is a term to really pretty much describe loneliness that's experienced over a long, long period of time. Neither loneliness or chronic loneliness are mental health conditions, but the two of them together can really affect your mental and body health. It's your body's constantly in that fight or flight, and that is an immense amount of stress that your body handles, and it's hard. It is very hard. However, I have a point. Loneliness and aloneness aren't the same. As I mentioned earlier, some people might thrive and not feel lonely if they're like in the middle of nowhere and their closest neighbors is 50 miles away. Some people relish in enjoying their solitude and being positive about that experience. Whereas isolation is more close to loneliness, where it feels like you can't reach out to anybody. And I want you guys to just take a moment and tell yourselves it's okay to be alone, and it's okay to enjoy being alone. You deserve to have time for yourself. Honestly, I take alone time for myself every day. I do. It's not like I don't love the people that are near me. It's not like I want to push them away or anything. I just want to enjoy existing as me. But being alone when you'd rather spend time with people, that's where it starts trickling down, where you are not fulfilling that need of yours. So please be aware of that when you're thinking about it. Like when you're like, am I lonely? Think about it. Are you actually lonely, or are you just not really taking the time to appreciate that, hey, I can exist by myself? Alone does not necessarily mean loneliness, okay? Okay. But we've talked a lot about the multifacets of loneliness, of all of that stuff, but what actually causes loneliness? I mentioned a little bit about not getting that need. There are other things that cause the loneliness besides the need of social connection. Some of those sources could be grief, losing somebody we love or we were close to, whether it being death, whether it being connection being lost, like you're no longer acquainted anymore. Grief is hard. It's hard. It's so hard, and that can really lead to a lot of loneliness. Life adjustments can be another cause, like getting a new job, going to a new school, changes, all of those changes that weren't really anticipated and disrupt your normal day-to-day can really exasperate feelings of loneliness. Because, like, for example, say pre-pandemic, pre-COVID, you loved working in your office. You really thrived getting that social interaction from other people when you were at your office. And then the pandemic happened and you had to work from home. And maybe you're still working from home. That's a ginormous change from the level of social interaction that you're getting and your routine to just working at home. And some people like working at home. I love working at home. Anyways, that could be one factor, contributing to loneliness. Another one is physical distance or isolation, which I slightly touched on earlier, but say you move to a new location. You move away from all of your friends, all of your family that were there, and you're just gone. You don't have that connection anymore. Or the isolation could come from, maybe you have a chronic illness now or a terminal illness. And those things can really lead to those feelings of loneliness. And there has been a lot of chronic illness stemming about from the pandemic that is still ongoing. Please, guys, please take precautions. Monitor like COVID levels and please protect yourselves and your loved ones. But being sick can really amplify loneliness. Another one is emotional distance. Say some people might not have close friends or family with shared interests that they can't really connect to. Like, sure, you could talk to people. Like, say you could be cordial with your family, but you don't really have something in common to talk about. That creates an emotional distance because, sure, you could be nice to whoever you want, but they're not close to you, This could also be like losing contact with acquaintances or growing apart, disagreements, breakups, all of those types of things can lead to emotional distance. And one of the last sources of loneliness is romantic or intimate relationship loss. This could be ranging from breaking up with your partner, ending an intimate relationship, or even just the distance that forms when you can't put enough work into your relationship and it feels like you're roommates instead of being a partner anymore. And all of those things are so hard to deal with, and it makes a lot of sense for loneliness to stem from them because that is a disconnect from you and the things that bring you joy and bring you that social need that we all have in some form. Besides the pain and the heavy emotional weight that brings from loneliness, there's actual physical damages that can stem from loneliness. A 2017 study found that there was a link between loneliness and higher risk of early death, cardiovascular issues, and worsened mental health. Another study in 2016, led by Newcastle University, showed there was a link between loneliness and a 30% increase in risk of stroke or development of coronary heart disease. Loneliness physically can hurt your heart. It has shown a link to that. And obviously, a link, correlation, does not mean causation. But the fact that there's a link there means that it's something that you need to pay attention to. Same with the rest of the other things that I say about the physical effects of loneliness. There, correlation does not equal causation, but it means pay attention. Another study linked loneliness and social isolation in twins and found evidence suggesting that lonely people often have depression. And depression, we're going to have an episode eventually about depression because a lot of people experience depression, but depression is so overwhelming, but yet numbing at the same time. And the fact that twins were observed and there was a link between loneliness and depression. It's scary. It is. It's honestly scary. You know what? I'm going to link all of these studies in the comment section below so that you guys can read through them because I don't want to just constantly summarize them because they all are like, loneliness is linked to this. But like, there's such good data on loneliness. Like, loneliness has an associated 40% increase in a person's risk of dementia. Dementia, where you literally start losing your sense of self, your memories, all of what makes you are who you are. And like another study showed that gene expressions, like, you know, your genes that play a role in your immune system's response to infection, found that, you know, loneliness creates an increase in your genes that are involved in inflammation and a decreased expression of genes in antiviral responses, meaning loneliness can physically make you more sick. There is a link there. Loneliness as an emotion is important. I want to tell you that because all emotions are valid. What matters is the actions that you do regarding that. But I really want to emphasize that loneliness hurts. Loneliness hurts us mentally, physically, and it, like, our brains are wired to believe that all of the people that could get us out of feeling lonely are threats, which makes it incredibly hard to get out of being lonely. And if you right now are listening to this and saying, wow, that was a lot, and I feel lonely, I'm so sorry that you are experiencing that. And please keep watching if you are, because I will be talking about steps that you can take to start remedying feelings of loneliness, because life is short, life is fleeting, and we never know when it'll just end. And you don't deserve to feel lonely in life. No one does. So, I will get to that, I promise. But what I want to talk about next is something that you might have heard, is the loneliness epidemic. Even before the COVID-19 pandemic, 1 out of 2 people in the US reported feeling loneliness. That was pre-pandemic. I wonder what the numbers are now. But at the time, and I'm going to be focusing a lot on America because that's where I am and that's where this is really being touted as a problem. But America was already facing a mental health, I don't want to call it a crisis, but revolution almost, because people were really starting to look inward and be like, wow, I have a lot of things going on in my head. Ooh. And the pandemic only increased that more. Like, more and more people were looking inward and being like, wow, I got lots of stuff in my brain, and oh my goodness. And while I think that was a really good thing that happened, that we were able as a society to look inward and realize a lot of mental health things that we were going on, no steps are being taken to remedy that. Despite people that are quote unquote in power talking about a loneliness epidemic, nothing is being done to target the root problems of this. And that frustrates me. That frustrates me a lot, because while individually people feel loneliness for different reasons, societally there is so many things we can do to really start eliminating loneliness. Back in May of 2023, the U.S. State's Surgeon General, Dr. I'm going to butcher your name, sir, I'm so sorry, Vivek Murthy, released something called a Surgeon General Advisory, pretty much calling attention to public health crises. And do you want to know what he talked about? Loneliness, isolation, and lack of connectivity in our country. I am going to read his statement word for word, so you can hear somebody who is in a position of power that is vital to mental and physical health, talking about what he feels about loneliness right now. Our epidemic of loneliness and isolation has been an underappreciated public health crisis that has harmed individual and societal health. Our relationships are a source of healing and well-being in plain sight, one that can help us live healthier, more fulfilled, and more productive lives. Given the significant health consequences of loneliness and isolation, we must prioritize building social connection the same way we have prioritized other critical public health issues such as tobacco, obesity, substance use disorders. Together, we can build a country that is healthier, more resilient, less lonely, and more connected. The Surgeon General compared loneliness to tobacco. And I'm sure while everybody has a different relationship with smoking, we all know smoking is bad for you. And here is the Surgeon General saying loneliness is just as bad. And yet, nothing is changing. There's no change. There's none. When the Surgeon General released this statement, he also brought out 6 foundational pillars for improving loneliness. And those pillars are strengthening social infrastructure, which we will talk about, like parks, libraries, and public programs. Another one is enacting pro-connection public policies at every level of government, including things like accessible public transport or paid family leave. Very good things. Mobilizing the health sector to address the medical needs that stem from loneliness. That's a given. Another one is reforming digital environments to critically evaluate our relationship with technology, which we will talk about. Another one is deepening our knowledge through more robust research into the issue, which I will give credit to. There is so much research about loneliness and how it affects you. Like, I got into a lot of rabbit holes when I was researching this. Like, so many rabbit holes because there's so many. And the last pillar is cultivating a culture of connection. While I personally, from my experience as a human and, you know, as somebody who cares about mental health and has done research into this topic, I think those pillars are very solid. Like, they hit the points that we need to, but what is going to change? You want to know something? The loneliness epidemic isn't really a new thing, really. We have been dealing with this for decades. There has been declines on a lot of different social things for decades. For example, let's talk about social networks. I'm not talking about the Social Network movie. I'm talking about social networks. Your social network is the people that you are around. So being it coworkers, being it family, being it anyone you interact with socially regularly. There have been social exposure measurements obtained from 2003 to 2020, finding that social isolation, measured by the average time spent alone, increased from 2003. So, 2003's numbers were 285 minutes a day, or 140 hours a month, where you are alone, completely alone, to 2019, where that increased to 309 minutes a day, to roughly about 154 hours a month. And then it increased again in 2020 with 330 minutes per day and about, 166 hours per month. And yes, I do want to have that caveat. Obviously, pandemic changed a lot of how we socially interacted. But the fact that we had very large increase of time spent alone really is indicative of how our social networks are changing. Either we are spending less time with those social networks, or we literally have a smaller social network, so we can't interact with all of the people as much as we want to. To expand on that, the amount of time some people spent with their friends socially in person decreased from 2003, which used to be about 60 minutes a day or 30 hours a month, to 20 minutes a day, 10 hours a month in 2020. There was a decrease of 20 hours per month spent in engaging with friends in person. And that is a very big key indicator of our social networks changing, meaning we have less people to go to. Half of Americans in 2021 reported having 3 or fewer close friends. Half of Americans. However, in 1990, only a quarter of Americans reported the same number. Meaning, back in the olden days, people had more than 3 close friends on average. But now, half of Americans are at that number. We are developing less close and close relationships. Why? Well, we will get to that. The percentage of Americans also living alone has increased decade to decade. In 1960, single-person households only accounted for 13% of all households. However, in 2022, that number more than doubled, with 29% of all households being Americans living alone. And I'm sure that number has quite changed because, you know, rent and mortgage rates are on the rise. But statistically, we spend a lot of time at home. And if we are the only person at home, you are alone. And sure, you can thrive in being alone, like I have mentioned earlier, but that could also greatly reduce the amount of time you have social interaction. It's kind of like a double-edged sword. Sometimes things are good and sometimes things are bad. And I know I use the incorrect saying, but you get what I mean, right? Another statistic is in 2020, only 47% of Americans said that they belong to a church, synagogue, or a mosque. That is down from 70% of Americans back in 1999. And this is the first time that this survey was taken that it ever dipped below 50%. I know there could be a lot of factors for that, but I'm not talking about why those numbers changed. I'm talking about what effect that number change brings. While religion, some people can have disagreements with and have negative feelings towards, the fact that you would regularly go to this one location every single week to do something that unified your community, we lost that by a huge margin. That is a social network that we no longer can pursue if you do not go to church. I'm not using this as like, hey, everybody go to church, yeah, religion, because I understand. I'm not religious, so I would hate going to a church. But the fact that there is a decrease of people going to a communal place and missing out on that social interaction is big, because that is a factor in increasing loneliness. And now let's talk a little bit about social media. The percentage of US adults 18 and over who reported using social media increased from 5% in 2005 to about 80% in 2019. Now, you might be looking at the rest of the numbers that I mentioned and being like, wow, everything changed for the worst except for social media. Does that mean social media is the cause? No. The loneliness epidemic is not caused just by social media. It is a factor, but it is not the sole cause. There's benefits to social media and technology. For example, people who are severely disabled, they might not be able to leave their house and do all of the fun social things that people usually do, but like they can create a social space for themselves on the internet and have that social connection still. They can still video call friends and have that face-to-face interaction. They can make new friends all across the globe. It's amazing what social media can do. You can stay in contact with friends and family that no longer are in your physical space. You can have so many different routes of social participation, finding a true community that accepts you and loves you for who you are, especially if you're from a marginalized group. You can have such beautiful connections off of social media. For example, I have friends that I have been in contact with for over 10 years, and they are some of the closest people to me in my life, excluding husband and my child, but like they mean so much to me socially. And I have met them maybe like once or twice in real life. I don't want you to take anything from this and saying, wow, social media is the reason why everyone is more lonely because we all spend time on our phones. No, that's not it at all. It can contribute it. Say, for example, you're using social media to bully people or just endlessly scroll and not interact, then it could lead to more loneliness. But if you're using social media and the internet to connect That is a good and amazing thing. Technology can monopolize our attention, and that's bad. So don't do that. And it can also diminish self-esteem, which can increase, loneliness. So take this with what I'm saying is use social media in a healthy way that fosters connections and community rather than detrimenting yourself to taking all of your attention, taking all of your self-esteem, and making you want to hate and bully people. Yeah? Yeah. But all of those statistics were a lot of numbers. But I wanted you to show those things, to show that there has been a decline since, ye olden days. There's been a slow decline. And one of the reasons that I think this is happening, the decreasing of our social networks, the increasing of loneliness and social isolation, is because this is more of a personal thing, and I will go on a tangent because I said we were going to talk about it. Social infrastructure. Yeah. Aren't you thrilled to be learning about social infrastructure in a video about loneliness? I feel bad about it, but I don't feel bad about it at the same time because, after diving into loneliness, I am such a proponent now for social infrastructure. If I had unlimited money, I would literally just go around and start building social infrastructure, not caring about profits. I'd be like, here, take this, breathe, breathe social interaction. But you might be wondering, what the hell is social infrastructure? Well, it includes the physical assets of a community, such as libraries and parks, programs such as volunteer organizations and member associations, and local policies such as public transportation and housing that support development of social connection. All good things in this world. And regardless of your politics, anything that breeds social connection is a good thing, okay? Okay. In one of the most recent evaluations, by who again? The infrastructure report card. That's right. I did not have that in my notes, but thankfully I had a link. It was released in 2017. America's overall infrastructure score was a D+. Same as 2013. It didn't change. It didn't improve. There are some of the 7 systems, like hazardous waste and leaves, those stuff received moderately better scores than, in 2013. Some things like public transit and solid waste things did worse. Worse. Aviation, D. Roads, D. Drinking water, D. And energy, D. Retained their awful scores. America's infrastructure is a D+. That won't make you pass any school at all. A D+. The American Society for Civil Engineers does not really grade our social infrastructure, unfortunately. However, if it did, it would be the same as all of those D's that we were getting. Yep. Yummy D's are probably even worse, honestly. For decades, America has neglected the shared spaces that shape all of our interactions. The consequences of that neglect might be less visible than, bridges falling into holes, that kind of stuff, but it's no less important. I want you to think back to, I'm going to say it, 90s sitcoms. If you watched 90s sitcoms, I'm mainly talking about Friends because I know a lot of people watch Friends. I haven't really watched Friends, but think about early day sitcoms, or just sitcoms in general. They go to public places. Sometimes could be a bar that they just go to every single week because that's their bar. Or sometimes, like, they go to a park and have a walk in the park or a picnic in the park, or, you know, ride the subway in New York or something like that. But, like, these are public places that foster social interaction. And America is just letting it die. I'm not saying you individually are letting it die. No. I'm talking about America as a system is letting it die. If we let these public spaces die, we can't rely on commercial infrastructure to bring up the slack. Meaning, like, you can't be driven by profit when you are trying to focus on social connection. A lot of for-profit places have no loitering signs. You go to a coffee place, you can't loiter. You got to get out so you can make more room for a customer that will pay. There's no more time to sit and enjoy something because the way our society is structured right now, it's all about money. Why would I, a business owner, let somebody sit in my coffee shop for 3 hours if it takes away 3 hours worth of other paying customers because they can't sit there? And it's really unfortunate. It's heartbreaking to me. It's heartbreaking because, sure, social infrastructure does not provide a monetary gain, okay? Libraries are publicly funded. Parks are publicly funded. We have to fund these things ourselves and put our money where our mouths is and care about the structures that foster social community. Social infrastructure provides a social return, not a financial return. And America only cares about the financial return right now. I'm not saying, again, you individually might also be as passionate as I am about this. But unfortunately, it's not being cared about by the people that have the power to make these decisions. The government would more likely finance, things that could make them money. And they'd rather not invest in social infrastructure because it doesn't provide any tangible and visible good. Air quotes, because we all know having that place you can go to fosters social connection. And within that time period of those statistics that I had mentioned, social infrastructure has been crumbling. I remember seeing a post about how the library in one city is closed on the weekends. A library closing on the weekends. Library closing right after school hours or work hours. That provides no time for us to go and socially engage. I really could go on and on for hours about the benefits of social infrastructure. It could improve biodiversity. It could reduce the fear of crime. It can improve childhood development, encourage economic growth, and so much more. But fundamentally, what I'm trying to get at here is social infrastructure can combat the loneliness epidemic because it will create spaces that we can foster community and connection and grow once again our social networks so that we can avoid the feelings of physical isolation, of emotional distance. It creates the spaces that we can grow and foster ourselves. Social infrastructure can combat the loneliness epidemic. And the loneliness epidemic is bad. Just as the Surgeon General said, he compared it to tobacco. But does that mean social infrastructure will be focused on. You're funny. No, it doesn't make money. And it hurts a lot. It really hurts me a lot. Like, that's why I was so passionate and talked way too long about it. But it really matters to me that social infrastructure is slowly crumbling. Let's talk now about actual steps you can take to fight loneliness. So anybody who like blanked out during my social infrastructure and come back. We're talking about things that you can actually do. There are a couple of steps that you can take to actually fight your loneliness. And these are things that you yourself can do. I'm not talking about, changing the entire country and the fundamental problem of capitalism. I'm talking about things that you can actually do. The first step that I want you to take when you are feeling lonely is find the cause of your loneliness. For example, maybe you are having trouble getting to really know people, whether it being new friends or coworkers or just the people around you. You really struggle to peel back the layers of the onion and get to know them. You might have just moved to a new city and you miss all of the things that you had in your old one. You might have a lot of casual friendships or casual hookups that, while a lot and prolific, they don't have meaning to them. Or you could have self-doubt, self-esteem issues, or social anxiety that get in the way of building genuine connections with other people. But I want you, whenever you're feeling lonely, is just to sit with yourself and say, why? Why am I lonely? Because when we can understand the cause of our emotions, it gives us the strength to do something about those emotions and change our situation. So, if you haven't watched my ASMR video on loneliness, go ahead and do that. But I'm going to recap that real quick on the steps that you can take right now, this very second. And then we'll talk about more long-term steps. So, one of them is admit that you are lonely. Admit it, go around and say, I am lonely. Let go of the stigma and the shame that is associated with being lonely, because there is quite a lot of them. Everyone feels lonely at times. It's not just you. Don't deny that you're lonely. Investigate it, admit it, learn about it. Other things you can do, like right now, this very second, is write down positive exercises, such as writing down positive memories or doing, smiling exercises, which are so weird. Like, you just smile in the mirror. Trust me, like, you have no reason to smile, but you just force yourself to smile. It'll trick your brain into feeling a little bit happier. It's cool. Or grateful, like writing out your gratitude towards things, specifically people. If you write gratitude about people, it helps foster that feeling of gratitude and the positivity associated with it. So another thing that you could do in this very right second is just do things. Do something you want to do, even if it doesn't have a person, like a new restaurant open in town. Go. Take yourself out on a date, because you deserve it. Volunteer if you want to. Relish in the ability that you can do whatever you want when you are alone right now. Like, relish in the fact that, hey, nobody's going to bother you if you watch, like, an entire TV show. Or even, like, deciding how you want to socialize with other people. Like, say maybe you just want to talk to somebody, but you don't want to talk about the deep and hard feelings you're feeling. Maybe you just send memes to some of your friends and be like, hey, I just want to shoot the shit. So those are things you can do right now. If you want a more detailed description, please go and watch my ASMR video about loneliness. There's a lot there. Now, I want to talk about the long-term steps you can do to combat your loneliness. These are things that aren't going to immediately change your life, but they are things that, as you implement them, it's going to help you feel better and help you combat your feelings of loneliness and make you smile and make you feel connected with the things around you. Okay? First things that I want you to start doing, it's a very long-term thing, is putting yourself first. As a people pleaser, it's hard for me to say that. And I'm still working on that. It's been over a year of me working on it. But loneliness sometimes can stem from, not being able to meet up with friends and all of that stuff. Like, you try to create a relationship that you want with the people that are around you, and just life doesn't work out that way sometimes, yeah? I want you to rather put yourself first than them first. So, say you're having scheduling conflicts, put yourself first. If they can't meet that scheduling, that's their issue, not your issue. You deserve to have the kinds of relationships that you want. If you are finding that some of your friends are no longer meeting your social needs, take that step and find more friends. Create friends and relationships that you want. Not what your friends expect, not what they want, what you want. Because as we put ourselves first, we are making our needs valid and giving the space and time that our needs need to really be satisfied. Change the relationships that you need to that are good for you. And I'm not saying don't like pressure people into doing things to please you. No, that's not what I'm talking about. I want you to put the effort into putting yourself first. Another thing is, societally, we have a lot of pressure to be in a romantic relationship. It could be from your family, like parents, or it could be from friends or media. Like, that expectation of us can make us feel lonely, because you're like, wow, I don't have a relationship. That means I don't have anybody. I'm alone. I'm lonely. But if you put yourself first and you kind of like, I don't know how I say it, like date yourself, you can appreciate the time that you aren't tied to the hip for somebody. Don't underestimate the time that you can really go out and just do whatever you want to when you want to. That brings such a level of enjoyment and such empowerment. Heck, do you want to know something? People watching by yourself is actually very fun. You could just try to guess what all of their interactions are, or like be like, that girl looks like she's having an argument. Oh no. I just kind of make up stories. Like, treat yourself. Having a lot of friends and contacts in your life doesn't really mean you won't feel lonely. Loneliness can stem from self-esteem and self-confidence issues, but by putting yourself first, you are improving your self-esteem and your confidence, because you are valuing yourself. And those that, like, valuing yourself is a key thing in fighting yourself, like, low self-esteem and self-confidence. And fun fact, it actually can improve your relationships. It can really improve your relationships, because then people see you as a person rather than just something in their life. And it makes you easier to step up and say your boundaries. And doing that creates a healthier relationship, and a healthier relationship means combating loneliness. Yay! Another thing to put yourself first is thinking about what self-care means for you. We did do an entire episode about self-care, so check it out and figure out what self-care looks like for you. I know self-care for me, like, I love having just a nice wind down after I get my toddler down for bed. Like, I either take a shower on the nights that I need to shower, or, I wash my face, I do my skincare routine, I get in comfy clothes, and I really put that care into myself, because I am valuable and I'm putting myself first and combating loneliness. Another thing of putting yourself first is doing activities you enjoy just by yourself. Maybe you like going for walks. Go for a walk by yourself. Maybe you like doing arts and crafts, like me. Do it by yourself. Relish that time that you have to just do. And also, doing things that you like is not only just like a boost to yourself because they're things you like, but it helps solidify that the fact that you can do things by yourself without feeling lonely. It's it's good. It's good. Find things to make yourself be first in your life. And this is a long-term commitment because you deserve it. I don't care if your brain right now is saying, no, I don't deserve it. I'm an awful person. You deserve it. That is just your self esteem and your self confidence trying to talk shit to you. Everyone deserves to put themselves first and care for themselves just like how you would care for anybody else. Because like on airplanes, they tell you got to put your mask on before you put somebody else's mask on first. You got to help yourself before you can help others. And really being able to be comfortable with yourself is a huge step in combating loneliness. Another thing you can do. Now, this one is a hit or miss. I'm not recommending this to everybody, but adopting a pet can really combat loneliness. Again, do not recommend this for everybody. I want you to be financially stable enough to handle another living being. I want you to have enough time to handle a living being, and I want you to have enough care for another living being before you adopt a pet. Don't just adopt a pet and think it's gonna fix everything. It's a long-term step. Requires a lot of work. But having another living creature that is inhabiting your home can help your life feel more fulfilled and increases your connection to the world in general. There have been research that consistently suggests that pets have myriad of positive mental health benefits, including decreasing loneliness, which is amazing. That's what we're living for. And even like having exercise with your pet, whether it's walking outside or like taking them to a place where they can play, it increases your chances of meeting new people, like meeting a new dog friend. It's great. It's great. In a survey of almost about 6,000 people, nearly 90% of those people had one pet, and 86% of pet owners stated that their animals provided emotional support during like the beginning of the pandemic, like the first lockdowns that were happening. They were getting emotional support from their pets because they love and care about their pets, and they have that connection with another living, breathing, intelligent being. Another study showed that pet owners are less likely to experience depression, including loneliness, as pets really provide a sense of purpose. Some days you might find it hard to want to take care of yourself, but on those days, you remember, I have a cat. That cat relies on me. I gotta get out of bed to feed my cat at least. Like, that's the least I can do. Another study, I'm just tossing out all these studies that found, like, if you have a strong attachment with your pet, it's linked to a lower depression rates among adults. It's the benefits of having a pet is so good. Adopting a pet can reduce anxiety symptoms by producing oxytocin, which is the feel-good hormone, and can reduce the effects of PTSD, and it can help people who have PTSD live more fulfilling lives. Adopting a pet is very beneficial to fighting loneliness, but I do not want you to do it just to fight loneliness. I want you to adopt a pet because you genuinely want a connection with another living, intelligent being, okay? Don't use your pet as medication. Use it as a friend and something you care for. Okay? And do your research and prepare for adopting a pet, because that is a life-changing decision, because pets are not something that you can throw away after a couple of months. They are something that stay with you for years and years and years, and you want to provide a good life for your pet, just as how the pet will be providing benefits back to you. It's a symbiotic relationship. You got to do good for your pet, and your pet will do good for you. So, if you are in a stage of your life where you're like, yeah, I kind of want to, get a pet, really look into it and really consider it. Okay? But it's a long-term decision. I'm really emphasizing that because I know a lot of people buy like bunnies around Easter time for their kids, and that's a huge commitment. And you can't just get rid of them after like a weekend. No. Their lifetime, like they live for like 10 plus years. It's a big decision. So don't be dumb. And got 2 left on long-term steps. And I did talk about this one a little bit already, but community and social infrastructure. Fundamentally, society is lonely. And I've talked about the benefits of social infrastructure and how shit our social infrastructure is right now. We need to begin reimagining and rewiring like our social relationships in all forms of life, in healthcare, schools, and other institutions. And while one person can't change all of this, you can take steps that are good for you and your community. So working to restore social infrastructure is a really good thing you can do. One of the ways you could do that is calling your politicians and demand more attention on social infrastructure. And I understand not everybody wants to do that, but sometimes that's what we gotta do to have change. But things that you personally can do within your hands, the hands that you have. These are just some ideas. You're welcome to come up with more, but like maybe host a potluck. A potluck is, getting together where everybody brings a little bit of food, a little bit of fun, and like sharing it with everybody in your community, whether it being friends or family or literally neighbors next to you, Host it. Host a potluck. Maybe you can do another, like, a stranger dinner where you send out this call of like, hey, everybody meet at the public park, dinner will be provided. And then you meet people that come and creating that public space for people to interact. Maybe you can work on starting a housing co-op. Co-ops can save money, and sharing common places, lowering operating costs, public subsidies for affordable housing. That kind of stuff provides such benefits to social cohesion. And obviously, cheaper housing is very good. It means we have more money to go to other things. And maybe consider, like, if you are financially stable enough, like creating a housing co-op. Like, that's something you could do. Maybe you can create a gift circle. The gift circle is founded by Alpha Lowe and spread by Charles Einstein? Is it really Einstein? It looks like Einstein. From my notes, I apologize if it's not Einstein. But it's pretty much where you create a group and you just do gifts. You get together to share gifts and needs, and you sit in a circle and you just create that connection between one another. You can find a different way of doing that. Maybe like you do once a week, everybody like gets together and makes a gift for a specific person in the community. Like, or maybe you literally just go door to door to your neighbors and being like, hey, I got a gift for you. I appreciate you. Another thing is maybe working on a public garden. It's not just beautiful to look at, but it creates a space that people can use and grow things in. Maybe you have a lot of space in your backyard. If you have a backyard and you're like, there's a lot of space that things can grow. You know, you can say, hey, I have a community garden in my backyard. If you want to grow something, just come and, you know, meet me and grow stuff. Maybe you can create a work group where, say, there's a lot of house chores that go around, whether you own a house, whether you're renting a house, whether you live in an apartment or anything like that. There's chores to be done. And maybe fostering a community where you're like, hey, everybody, let's like work together and help people do these things. Aunt Kathy's, fence broke down the other weekend. Let's form a community where everybody works on building the fence. We all have just a fun chatting time where we eat and just fix a fence. Or another idea, which this is going to be my last idea because I'm sure you guys can think of more ideas than I can right now. But creating a social street. Like, I remember vividly when I was a kid, we had street parties. Like when I was, I don't know, I was 5 or something, where everybody would just get together and form a giant party in the middle of the street. We would close down the street so like cars just wouldn't drive through, but like we would have bouncy houses, music, and games, and just an entire community of people just hanging out and having fun, you know? There's lots of ways that you can take steps into creating social community and all of that stuff. So take some time and consider what kind of steps that you could take to building something like that for your community, or helping somebody else build that for your community. Say you're not a social person and your friend is, you can like work together and they could be the social face of it, and you're just like, I'm the one with the ideas and the things. You know, that kind of stuff. And the last thing is therapy. I feel like every single one of these mom talks ends in therapy as a step that you can take, because therapy is, when you have a good therapist, therapy is life-changing. And I do acknowledge that there are a lot of therapists that aren't quote-unquote good. They might be good for some other people, but they might not be good for you. You gotta literally shop for a therapist. It's hard. It's a lot of work. But when you find a therapist that really works with you, your therapist can help explore what feeling lonely means to you. They can help create plans that help you manage your feelings of loneliness and create steps that make you unable to feel lonely. If, say, maybe you're a very anxious person and anxiety about social interactions makes you feel isolated and alone, you might find cognitive behavioral therapy to be helpful. That therapy kind of focuses on your thoughts, beliefs, and attitudes and how they affect your feelings and behavior. Your therapist, if you get a therapist that's proficient in CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, they can help you develop those coping strategies that you need for different situations and help work on your anxiety so that you can take that step and get into social situations. So, it's been a long chat with a little bit of tangents about social infrastructure, but I want you to know the final message of this is loneliness hurts. It is physically and emotionally damaging. And we live in a society that is not taking the steps to fight loneliness and the loneliness epidemic that has been forming over decades. But now we are in a state in our society that we care about mental health, and we care about progressing our mental health and finding things that bring us joy. And that there are steps that you can take, either right now or long-term steps that you can take to feel less lonely and less hurt when you are by yourself. Because loneliness is telling us that we are not feeling fulfilled socially. We are not feeling connected with the world. And everyone deserves to feel connected with the world in one way or another. Even if you're just by yourself in your bedroom, you deserve to feel that connection, even if you're not actively participating in that connection. So, take it from your internet mom. Go and do things that help you feel less lonely. And take those steps that you need to build connection. You deserve it. You really do. I may not know you personally, but every single human being deserves happiness and deserves to feel connected to the world, because it's one of the amazing things about humanity is the connections that we can foster and the love and care that it can bring. So you deserve it. Everyone does. Promise you that. Thank you guys for hanging out and listening to this Let's Talk Mom, because I sure talked. And I'm mom. I'm your mom. Not really. Unless you're actually my physical child listening to this many years down the line. I only have one child, biologically. Oh, that was such a bad joke. But take care of yourself. Treat yourself with kindness. And keep fighting your battles. I'll see you guys next time. Toodaloo!